David Thompson sat in his empty kitchen, staring at the cold cup of coffee in his hands. The silence in his house was so thick you could almost touch it. 3 months had passed since the accident that took away his wife Lisa, and every corner of their home still felt like it was waiting for her to walk through the door. He was 35 years old, a carpenter with calloused hands and a broken heart. His friends kept telling him to get back out there, to start dating again, but David couldn't even imagine sharing his morning coffee with someone new. The thought made his stomach turn, that Tuesday morning started like any other. David was fixing Mrs. Chen's front porch when she mentioned something that would change his life forever. She was talking about her volunteer work at the local community center, and she mentioned 3 little girls who had been in the foster care system for almost 2 years. Such sweet children, Mrs. Chen said, shaking her head sadly. 3 sisters. But they keep getting separated because most families only want 1 child, not 3. Something in David's chest tightened. He found himself asking questions. How old were they? Why were they in the system? Mrs. Chen explained that their mother had passed away from a drug overdose, and there were no other family members who could take them in. The oldest one, she's 8, and she tries so hard to take care of the younger ones, Mrs. Chen continued. But every time they get placed together, something happens and they get split up again. It's breaking those little hearts. David went home that night and couldn't stop thinking about those 3 girls. He walked through his 4-bedroom house, looking at all the empty space. Lisa had always wanted children, but they never got the chance. She used to say their house felt too quiet, too big for just 2 people. The next morning, David called the foster care office. The social worker, Ms. Rodriguez, was surprised to hear from a single man interested in adopting 3 children. She explained that it wasn't common, especially for someone with no experience raising kids. I have to be honest with you, Mr. Thompson, she said during their first meeting. These girls have been through a lot. The oldest one, Maya, she's very protective of her sisters. She doesn't trust adults easily anymore. The middle one, Kaisha, she's 6 and very quiet. She hasn't spoken much since her mother died. And the youngest, Zara, she's only 4, but she has nightmares almost every night. David listened to every word, his heart getting heavier with each detail. But instead of scaring him away, it made him more determined. These children needed someone who wouldn't give up on them. The process was harder than David ever imagined. There were background checks, home visits, interviews, and mountains of paperwork. Some people in his small Ohio town started talking. They whispered behind his back at the grocery store and the hardware shop. Why would a white man want to adopt 3 black children? Some asked. What's he really up to? David's own brother called him crazy. You don't know anything about raising kids? Let alone 3 traumatized children, his brother said during a heated phone call. And they're not even... people are going to talk, David. But David had made up his mind. He started reading books about child psychology, about trauma, about raising children of different races. He learned about hair care, about cultural traditions, about the importance of helping children maintain their identity and heritage. His first meeting with the girls was at the foster care office. Maya, the 8-year-old, stood in front of her, sisters like a tiny bodyguard. Her dark eyes were serious, too serious for someone so young. She had neat braids and wore a purple dress that was slightly too big for her. Kaisha hid behind Maya, peeking out with curious eyes. She clutched a small stuffed elephant that looked like it had been loved for years. Her hair was in 2 ponytails with bright yellow ribbons. 4-year-old Zara was the only one who seemed excited. She bounced on her toes and grinned at David, showing a gap where her front tooth was missing. Her hair was in small twists with colorful beads that clicked when she moved her head. Are you going to be our new daddy? Zara asked, making the social worker smile. Maya quickly shushed her little sister. Don't get excited, she whispered. Adults always change their minds. David knelt down to their level. I'm David, he said softly. And I'm hoping we can be a family. But only if you girls want that too. The visits continued for weeks. David would take them to the park, to ice cream shops, to the library. Slowly, Maya began to relax around him. Kaisha started talking in whispers, then in full sentences. Zara. treated every outing like the best adventure in the world. One day, while they were feeding ducks at the pond, Maya asked David a question that nearly broke his heart. "If we're bad, will you send us back?" David stopped throwing breadcrumbs and looked at this brave little girl who had been carrying the weight of the world on her small shoulders. "Maya," he said seriously, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. If you become my daughters, that means forever. Good days, bad days, easy days, hard days, forever means forever. Do you understand?" Maya studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The court hearing was on a cold December morning. Snow was falling outside the courthouse windows, and David's hands were shaking as he straightened his tie. He had never been more nervous or more sure about anything in his life. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes, asked David several questions about his readiness to raise 3 children on his own. She asked about his support system, his financial stability, his understanding of the challenges ahead. "Mr. Thompson," the judge said finally, "these children have been through more loss than any child should experience. Are you prepared to be not just their father, but their anchor? Their constant in a world that has shown them very little consistency?" David stood up straighter. "Your Honor, I can't promise I'll be perfect. I can't promise I won't make mistakes. But I can promise I'll love them, protect them, and never give up on them. They've been separated too many times already. I want to give them a home where they never have to worry about being split up again." When the judge announced that the adoption was approved, Zara cheered so loudly that everyone in the courtroom started laughing. Kaisha burst into happy tears, and Maya, tough little Maya, finally smiled a real smile as they walked out of the courthouse. Officially the Thompson family, David felt Lisa's presence in that moment. He knew she would have loved these girls. And somehow, he felt like she had a hand in bringing them together. That night, in their new home, David tucked each girl into their own bed for the first time. As he was saying goodnight to Maya, she grabbed his hand. "David?" she whispered. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Can I call you Dad now?" David's eyes filled with tears as he kissed her forehead. "I would love that more than anything in the world." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering their small town in a blanket of white. But inside the Thompson house, 3 little girls slept peacefully, knowing they were finally home. And in the living room, David sat looking at the photo from the courthouse, the first picture of their new family, wondering what adventures tomorrow would bring. He had no idea that 18 years later, this family photo would hold secrets that would change everything they thought they knew about each other. The first morning in their new home, David woke up to the sound of crying. He rushed to Zara's room and found her sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face. She had wet the bed and was terrified that David would be angry with her. Hey, it's okay," David said softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Accidents happen. Let's get you cleaned up." This became their routine for the first few weeks. David learned that being a single father to 3 girls was like juggling while riding a bicycle. Every day brought new challenges he never expected. Maya took her role as the oldest sister very seriously. She would wake up early to help Kaisha and Zara get dressed, brush their teeth, and eat breakfast. David noticed she barely ate her own food, always making sure her sisters had enough first. It broke his heart to see an 8-year-old carrying so much responsibility. "Maya," David said one morning as she was braiding Kaisha's hair, "you don't have to take care of everyone anymore." "That's my job now." Maya looked at him with those serious dark eyes. "But what if something happens to you? Who will take care of them?" David knelt down and took her small hands in his. "Nothing is going to happen to me. And even if something did, you're still just a kid. Your job is to be 8 years old, not to be a mom." It took months for Maya to truly believe him. Slowly, she started acting more like a child. She began laughing at silly jokes, asking for help with homework, and even admitting when she was scared of thunder. Kaisha was different. She was the quiet observer of the family. She would sit in the corner with her stuffed elephant, watching everything but saying very little. David learned that she loved music. Whenever he played the radio while cooking, Kaisha would hum along softly. One day, David found an old keyboard at a garage sale. It was missing a few keys and definitely seen better days, but when he brought it home, Kaisha's eyes lit up like, "Christmas morning, is this for me?" she whispered. "Would you like to learn how to play?" David asked. Keisha nodded so hard her ponytails bounced. Within weeks, she was picking out simple melodies. David saved every penny he could to get her proper piano lessons with Mrs. Patterson, an elderly teacher in town who was known for her patience with children. The first time David heard Keisha play a complete song, he had to step outside because tears were running down his face. This quiet little girl who barely spoke was expressing herself through music in ways words couldn't capture. Zara was the sunshine of the family. She had an endless supply of energy and questions. Why is the sky blue? Where do babies come from? Can I have a pony? David learned to expect anything from her curious mind, but Zara also had the nightmares. Most nights she would wake up screaming, calling for her birth mother. David would rush to her room, hold her until she stopped shaking, and sometimes end up sleeping in the chair beside her bed. The hardest part wasn't the sleepless nights or the tantrums or even the financial pressure of raising 3 children on a carpenter's salary. The hardest part was dealing with other people at the grocery store. People would stare at their little family. Some were just curious, but others made comments that cut deep. One day, while they were buying school supplies, an older woman approached. "David, are you babysitting for someone?" she asked, looking at the girls with suspicion. "No," David replied firmly. "These are my daughters." The woman's eyes widened. "Oh, well, that's interesting." Maya, who was now 9, had started to notice these interactions. One evening, she asked David why people looked at them funny. David sat all 3 girls down in the living room. He had been dreading this conversation but knew it was important. "Some people think families have to look the same," he explained. "They think because my skin is different from yours, we can't be a real family, but they're wrong. Family isn't about what you look like. It's about loving each other and taking care of each other. Are we not a real family?" Kaisha asked quietly. "We are the most real family in the world," David said, pulling all 3 girls into a hug. "And don't let anyone tell you differently." Learning to do their hair was David's biggest challenge. The first time he attempted to braid Maya's hair for school, it looked like a bird's nest. Maya politely said it was fine, but David could see she was embarrassed. That weekend, he went to every beauty supply store in town asking for help. The owner of one shop, Mrs. Washington, took pity on him and spent 2 hours teaching him basic braiding techniques. "These girls need to know how beautiful their hair is," she told David. "Don't just learn to manage it, learn to celebrate it." David practiced every night. He learned about different oils, about protective styles, about the importance of silk pillowcases. Slowly, he got better. The day Maya told him he did her hair prettier than anyone ever had, David felt like he had won the lottery. As the girls grew, David made sure they knew about their heritage. He bought books about African American history, celebrated Black History Month with enthusiasm, and made sure they had dolls and books that looked like them. When Maya was in 4th grade, she came home upset because a boy in her class said she couldn't be a princess because princesses weren't black. David spent the evening showing her pictures of real African queens and princesses throughout history. "You come from a long line of strong, beautiful, powerful women," he told her. "Don't let anyone make you feel small." Money was always tight. David worked double shifts whenever he could, sometimes taking weekend jobs to pay for piano lessons, dance classes, and school supplies. He ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch so the girls could have variety in their meals. The girls never complained, but David noticed Maya patching holes in her shoes with tape. At night, he looked at his bank account and made a decision. He had been saving for a new truck, but Maya needed shoes more than he needed reliable transportation. The next day, Maya came home from school beaming. "Dad, look! My friends love my new shoes." Watching her confidence bloom was worth every sacrifice. By the time Maya turned 12, Keisha was 10, and Zara was 8. They had found their rhythm as a family. Maya had made the honor roll, Keisha was playing piano at church, and Zara had joined the school's drama club. David started keeping a photo album of their life together. Pictures of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, school plays, and ordinary Tuesday evenings doing homework at the kitchen table. Each photo told the story of a family that chose each other and fought for each other. One evening, while looking through the album, Zara asked a question that would stick with David for years. "Dad, do you think our first mom would be proud of us?" David looked at his 3 daughters, now growing into confident, kind, amazing young women. "I think she would be very proud. And I think she would be grateful that you 3 found each other and stayed together." What David didn't know was that this simple question would plant a seed of curiosity in the girls' minds. As they got older, they would start asking more questions about their past, questions that would lead them to discoveries that would shake their family to its core. But for now, in this moment, they were just a family. A father who learned to braid hair and 3 daughters who taught him that love doesn't see color. A family built not on biology, but on choice, commitment, and the unshakable belief that they belonged together. Maya was 16 now, and David could hardly believe how fast time had flown. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror every morning, trying different hairstyles and asking questions he never thought he'd have to answer. Questions like, do these jeans make me look weird? And why won't Tyler from my math class notice me? But lately, Maya had been asking different kinds of questions. Questions that made David's stomach twist with worry. It started during a school project about family. History. Maya came home one afternoon, tossing her backpack on the kitchen counter with more force than usual. "Dad, I need to know more about where we came from," she said. Not looking at him directly, David was making dinner, stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "For my project. Everyone else knows about their grandparents, where their families came from, what their parents did before they were born." "I don't know anything." David turned off the stove and faced his daughter. Maya had grown tall, almost as tall as him now. She had her hair in a neat bun, and her school uniform was perfectly pressed. But her eyes held a sadness that reminded him of that 8-year-old girl he'd first met. "You know your mother's name was Angela," David said carefully. "And you know she loved you girls very much. But what else?" Maya pressed. "Did she have parents, brothers or sisters? What did she like to do? What was she like before?" Maya's voice trailed off before the drugs took over. "Before she died." David heard the unspoken words loud and clear. That night, David pulled out the thin folder of documents from the adoption. He had read through them hundreds of times over the years, but there really wasn't much information. Angela Thompson, aged 24 when she died. No father listed on any of the birth certificates. No known relatives. The girls had been found in their apartment 3 days after. Angela's overdose by a neighbor who heard Zara crying. David had always known this day would come. The day when his daughters would want to know more about their past. He just wished he had better answers to give them. Kaisha, now 14, had her own way of dealing with questions about their history. She would sit at her piano for hours, playing sad melodies that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. David had saved up enough money to buy her a better keyboard, and she had gotten so good that she was now teaching younger kids at church, but David noticed that Kaisha would sometimes stop playing in the middle of a song and just stare out the window. When he asked her what she was thinking about, she would shrug and say, "Nothing important." One evening, while Kaisha was practicing, David sat down beside her on the piano bench. "That was beautiful," he said after she finished a particularly complex piece. "What's it called?" "I don't know," Kaisha said quietly. "I made it up." "What were you thinking about when you wrote it?" Kaisha was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice so soft David had to lean closer to hear her, she said, "I was thinking about our first mom. Do you think she liked music too? Do you think that's where I get it from?" David put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "I think she would be amazed by how talented you are. And I think she would love hearing you play. But we don't really know, do we?" Kaisha said, looking up at him with eyes that seemed older than her 14 years. "We don't know anything about her except how she died." David's heart ached. He had tried so hard to give his daughters a good life, to fill their world with love. and security. But he was realizing that no matter how much love he gave them, there would always be this empty space where their history should be. Zara, now 12, was dealing with her own struggles. She had always been the happy one, the one who could make everyone laugh even on the worst days. But lately she had been having the nightmares again. David would hear her crying in the middle of the night, and when he went to comfort her, she would tell him about dreams where people were trying to take her away from her family. "What if someone comes and says we don't really belong together?" Zara asked one night, clinging to David's shirt like she used to when she was little. "Why would you think that?" David asked, smoothing her hair. "Because kids at school say adopted. Families aren't real families. They say blood family is the only family that matters." David felt anger rise in his chest. Not at Zara, but at whoever had put these thoughts in his daughter's head. "Zara, look at me," he said firmly. "We are a real family. We chose each other, we love each other, we take care of each other. That's what makes a family real." But even as he said the words, David could see the doubt in Zara's eyes. The questions were growing bigger, and his answers were starting to feel smaller. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening in October. Maya had been spending more and more time on the computer, and David assumed she was doing homework or chatting with friends. But that night, she came downstairs with printed papers in her hand and a look on her face that David had never seen before. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, her voice shaking. David was watching TV with Kaisha and Zara, but something in Maya's tone made him immediately turn off the television. "What is it, sweetheart?" Maya sat down on the coffee table so she was facing all of them. "I've been looking online, trying to find information about our mom, about our family." David felt his stomach drop. "Maya, we talked about this. There isn't much information available." "That's just it, Dad. There should be more information. Even if she didn't have family, there should be records, birth certificates, school records, something." Maya spread the papers out on the coffee table. David could see they were printouts from various websites, official-looking documents, and search results. "I found our mom's obituary," Maya continued, "but it's weird. It says she died in Detroit, but our adoption papers say we were living in Cleveland." David looked at the papers, his heart racing. He had never seen Angela's obituary before. The adoption agency had handled everything. "Maybe there's a mistake," David said, but his voice sounded uncertain even to himself. "That's what I thought too," Maya said, "so I kept looking. And I found something else." She pulled out another paper. It was a birth certificate, but not one David had ever seen before. "This is Kaisha's birth certificate," Maya said. "But it says she was born in Chicago, not Cleveland like our adoption papers say." Kaisha leaned forward, staring at the document with her name on it. "Chicago? But I don't remember Chicago. None of us remember much from before foster care." Maya said, "But Dad, this doesn't make sense. If we were all born in different cities, how did we end up together?" David stared at the papers scattered across his coffee table. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what Maya had found. He had always trusted the adoption agency, trusted that they had given him accurate information about his daughter's background. "Maybe the agency made mistakes in the paperwork," David said weakly. "Maybe," Maya said. "But Dad, what if there's more? What if there are people out there who are looking for us? What if we have family we don't know about?" Zara started crying. "I don't want other family, I want our family." David pulled Zara onto his lap, but his mind was spinning. Maya was right. Something didn't add up. How had 3 girls from different cities ended up together in Cleveland? Why were there so many inconsistencies in their records? "Dad," Kaisha said quietly, "will you help us find out the truth?" David looked at his 3 daughters. Maya with her determined expression, Kaisha with her gentle hopefulness, and Zara with tears in her eyes. He had spent 8 years building their family, creating a safe world where they never had to worry about being separated or unwanted, but now that safe world felt like it was built on shaky ground. The questions his daughters were asking deserved answers, even if those answers might change everything they thought they knew about themselves. "Yes," David said finally. We'll find out the truth together. He had no idea that the truth would be more shocking than any of them could imagine. And he definitely didn't know that their search for answers would lead them to discoveries that would test everything they believed about family, love, and what it really means to belong to each other. David couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about the papers Maya had shown him about the inconsistencies that made no sense. He got up at 5 in the morning and made coffee, his hands shaking as he poured the water into the machine. The adoption agency had closed down 3 years ago. David remembered getting a letter about it, something about budget cuts and services being transferred to the state. At the time, he hadn't thought much about it. His girls were already settled, already his. Why would he need the agency anymore? Now, he wished he had paid more attention. That morning, while the girls were getting ready for school, David called in sick to work. He couldn't focus on building cabinets when his whole world felt like it was falling apart. Instead, he drove to the county offices to see what records he could find. The clerk at the records department was a tired-looking woman named Betty who seemed like she had been working there since the building was built. She looked at David over her reading glasses when he explained what he needed. "Adoption records are sealed, honey," she said, not unkindly, "even for the adoptive parents. You should have gotten copies of everything important when the adoption was finalized." "I did," David said, pulling out his folder. "But there are things that don't match up. Different cities, different dates. I just want to make sure everything is correct." Betty looked through his papers, frowning. "This is strange," she admitted. "Usually these forms are more consistent. Let me see what I can find." She disappeared into a back room for what felt like hours. When she came back, she had a puzzled expression on her face. "Mr. Thompson, I found something odd. The social worker who handled your case, Janet Morrison, she had a lot of cases that year. More than usual, and there were some ... irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" David's heart was pounding. "Cases where children were placed together even though protocol suggested they should have been handled separately. Files that were ... incomplete after she retired. There was an investigation, but most of her files were destroyed in that office fire we had 5 years ago." David felt like the ground was shifting under his feet. "What are you saying?" Betty leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I'm saying you might want to hire a private investigator. Someone who can dig deeper than I can here." That afternoon, David picked up the girls from school earlier than usual. They could tell something was wrong by the way he was gripping the steering wheel and the fact that he kept checking his rearview mirror like he was being followed. "Dad, you're scaring us," Kaisha said from the back seat. "What happened?" David pulled into their driveway and turned off the engine. He sat there for a moment, trying to figure out how to explain what he had learned without terrifying his daughters. "I went to the county office today," he said finally, "to look into those inconsistencies Maya found." "And?" Maya asked, unbuckling her seatbelt. "And it looks like there might have been some problems with how your adoption was handled." "Nothing. That changes the fact that you're my daughters," he added quickly, seeing the panic in Zara's eyes. "But there might be more to your story than we thought." That evening, David found a private investigator online. Robert Chen had good reviews and specialized in adoption cases. His office was in the next town over, in a small building that smelled like coffee and old paper. Mr. Chen was a quiet man in his 50s with kind eyes and a calm way of speaking that made David feel slightly less panicked. "I've seen cases like this before," Mr. Chen said after David explained the situation. "Sometimes social workers would bend rules to keep siblings together, especially if they thought it was in the children's best interest. But these inconsistencies," David said, spreading Maya's research across Mr. Chen's desk. "Different birth cities, different dates on some forms. It's like these records belong to different cases entirely." Mr. Chen studied the papers carefully. "Mr. Thompson, I need to ask you something, and I want you to prepare yourself for the answer. Are you certain these girls are biological sisters?" David felt like he had been punched in the stomach. "Of course they are. They were placed together as sisters. Maya takes care of the younger ones. They look ... I mean, But even as he said it, David realized he was grasping at straws. The girls didn't really look that much alike. He had always attributed that to them having different fathers or just normal family variation. Maya was tall and serious, Kaisha was petite with softer features, and Zara had different bone structure entirely. "Let me do some digging," Mr. Chun said gently. "I'll start with birth records in the cities listed on these documents. Give me 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were the longest of David's life." He tried to act normal around the girls, but Maya kept catching him staring at them with a worried expression. "Dad, you're being weird," she said one evening while they were doing dishes. "Together, just tell us what's going on." "I'm trying to get answers," David said. "But I need you to be patient with me, okay? And I need you to know that no matter what we find out, we're still a family." Maya stopped washing the plate in her hands. "Dad, you're really scaring me now. What aren't you telling us?" Before David could answer, his phone rang. It was Mr. Chun. "Mr. Thompson, can you come to my office tomorrow? And you might want to bring the girls? They're old enough to hear this, and they deserve to know." David barely slept that night. He kept thinking about all the bedtime stories he had told the girls about their mother, all the times he had talked about how lucky they were to have each other as sisters. What if it was all based on a lie? The next afternoon, David sat in Mr. Chun's office with his 3 daughters. Maya sat straight in her chair, her hands folded in her lap. Kaisha kept fidgeting with her bracelet. Zara had chosen to sit on the floor next to David's chair, leaning against his leg. Mr. Chun had several folders on his desk, and he looked like he hadn't slept much either. "I'm going to tell you what I found," he said carefully. "And it's going to be a lot to process." He opened the first folder. "Maya, you were born in Detroit to a 16-year-old girl named Angela Robinson. Your mother died during childbirth due to complications. You were placed in foster care immediately." Maya's face went pale. "But our adoption papers say our mother was Angela Thompson." "That's because there were 3 different Angelas," Mr. Chun said gently. He opened the second folder. "Kaisha, you were born in Chicago to Angela Martinez. She was 19 when you were born, but she struggled with addiction. You were removed from her care when you were 2 years old." Kaisha's eyes filled with tears. "What happened to her?" "She died of an overdose when you were 3. She had a sister, Maria, who tried to get custody of you, but there were bureaucratic complications." Mr. Chun opened the third folder. "And, Zara, you were born in Cleveland to Angela Washington. She was 22 when she had you, but she had severe mental health issues. She brought you to the hospital when you were 6 months old and never came back." The office was completely silent except for the sound of Zara starting to cry. "So we're not sisters?" Maya whispered. "Not biologically," Mr. Chun said. "But here's what happened. All 3 of you ended up in the Cleveland foster system between ages 2 and 4. Janet Morrison, your social worker, decided that you had bonded as sisters while in care together. She falsified some documents to make it easier to place you. Together as a family unit, David felt numb. She lied about everything? She believed she was doing the right thing, Mr. Chun said. She saw 3 little girls who had found each other and didn't want to separate you. But she broke several laws to make it happen. What about the relatives? David asked, his voice barely audible. Maya's family in Detroit? Kaisha's aunt in Chicago? Mr. Chun's expression grew even more serious. Maya, your maternal grandparents are still alive. They never stopped looking for you. They had no idea you had been placed for adoption. Maya stood up so quickly her chair almost fell over. My grandparents are alive? They've been looking for me? For 16 years, Mr. Chun confirmed. And Kaisha, your Aunt Maria lives in Chicago. She's married now, has 2 children of her own. She never forgot about you. Kaisha was crying so hard she could barely speak. She wanted me? Someone actually wanted me? David felt like his heart was breaking into a million pieces. These weren't just his daughters anymore. They belonged to other people, people who had been grieving their loss for years. What does this mean for us? Zara asked through her tears. Do we have to go live with them now? Mr. Chun looked at David with sympathy. That's something you'll all have to figure out together. The legal adoption is still valid. David is still your father in the eyes of the law, but these families have rights too. Rights to know you, to be part of your lives. As they drove home in silence, David realized that everything he thought he knew about his family had just crumbled. The girls he had raised weren't biological sisters. They had families out there who had been missing them for years, and somehow he was going to have to figure out how to share his daughters with people who had loved them first. The ride home from Mr. Chun's office was the quietest 20 minutes of David's life. None of the girls spoke. Maya stared out the passenger window. Keisha had her face buried in her hands, and Zara was curled up in the back seat, clutching her old stuffed elephant that she hadn't carried around in years. When they got home, David expected them to scatter to their rooms, to need space to process what they had just learned. Instead, all three girls sat together on the living room couch, holding hands like they used to do during thunderstorms when they were little. "So what happens now?" Maya finally asked, her voice hoarse from crying. David sat down in his chair. Across from them, the same chair where he used to read them bedtime stories and help with homework. Now it felt like there was a canyon between them. "I don't know," he admitted. "I honestly don't know." "Do you want to get rid of us now?" Zara asked in a small voice. "Now that you know we're not real sisters?" David's heart shattered. He got up and knelt in front of the couch, taking Zara's hands in his. "Listen to me, all of you. You are real sisters. You've been sisters for 14 years. You've taken care of each other, fought with each other, loved each other. That doesn't stop being real just because you don't share the same birth parents." "But we lied to you," Keisha whispered. "Our whole lives have been a lie." "You didn't lie to me," David said firmly. "You were children. A social worker made choices that weren't right, but she made them because she could see what I've always known. You three belong together." That night, none of the girls wanted to sleep alone. They dragged pillows and blankets into Maya's room and made a pile on the floor. Just like they used to do on Christmas Eve, David found them there in the morning, tangled up together like puppies. The phone call came 2 days later. Mr. Chun had contacted Maya's grandparents in Detroit. "They want to meet her," he told David. "They've been hoping for this day for 16 years. David's hands were shaking as he hung up the phone. He found Maya in the kitchen, making breakfast for her sisters like she always did. "Maya," he said carefully, "your grandparents want to meet you." Maya stopped scrambling eggs and turned around. "Are you going to let them?" "It's not my choice to make," David said. "It's yours." Maya was quiet for a long moment. "Will you come with me, if you want me to?" "What if they want me to stay with them? What if they try to take me away from you?" "And Keisha and Zara?" David pulled his daughter into a hug. "Then we'll deal with that when it happens." "But Maya, these people have been missing you your whole life. Don't you think they deserve a chance to know the amazing person you've become?" The meeting was arranged for the following weekend. Maya's grandparents, Robert and Beverly Johnson, drove down from Detroit. They were in their 70s, a quiet couple who held hands when they walked and had pictures of Maya as a baby on their phones. They met at a park halfway between the two cities. David watched from a picnic table as Maya approached her grandparents. For the first time, Beverly started crying the moment she saw her, and Robert just stood there with his mouth open. "You look just like your mother did at your age," Beverly whispered, reaching out to touch Maya's face. For the next 2 hours, David watched his daughter learn about the family she never knew she had. Her mother had been an honor student who wanted to be a teacher. She loved to read and play basketball. She had been planning to go to college when she got pregnant. "We tried to find you," Robert told Maya, his voice breaking. "We went to every agency, every office. They told us there was no record of our daughter having a baby." "Because of the false paperwork," Maya said quietly. "We never stopped looking." Beverly said, "We set up a college fund for you, just in case. We celebrated your birthday every year, even though we didn't know where you were." David felt like he was watching his daughter discover a whole other life she could have had. Part of him was happy for her, but part of him was terrified that she would choose this new family over the one they had built together. When it was time to leave, Beverly hugged Maya tight. "We don't want to disrupt your life," she said. "We just want to be part of it if you'll let us." The meeting with Kaisha's Aunt Maria was different. Maria was 35 now, married to a man named Carlos, with 2 young children. She drove up from Chicago with tears streaming down her face before she even got out of the car. "I fought for you," was the first thing she said to Kaisha. "I tried so hard to get custody, but they said I was too young, that I didn't have enough money. I never stopped fighting." Maria pulled out a box from her car. Inside were letters she had written to Kaisha every year on her birthday, letters she never had an address to send to. There were pictures of the family Kaisha had never known, stories about her mother's love of music. "She played guitar," Maria told Kaisha. "She would have been so proud to see you play piano." Kaisha cried so hard she couldn't speak. David had never seen her so emotional, not even during her worst nightmares as a little girl. "My kids know about you," Maria said. "They've been asking when they could meet their cousin. We have a guest room that we've always called Keisha's room, even though we didn't know if we'd ever find you." The hardest part was explaining to the biological families that the girls weren't just individuals, they were a unit. They were sisters, by choice even if not by blood. "We come as a package," Maya told her grandparents during their second meeting. "I can't have a relationship with you if it means losing my sisters." "And I can't leave David," Kaisha told her aunt. "He's been my dad for 12 years. I'm not choosing between you and him." To David's amazement, the families understood. Maybe it was because they had spent so many years missing these girls that they were just grateful to have them back in any form. Maybe it was because they could see how much the girls loved each other, and the man who had raised them, Robert and Beverly, started driving down from Detroit once a month. They would take Maya and her sisters out for dinner, share stories about their daughter, and slowly become part of the Thompson family rather than trying to replace it. Maria did the same from Chicago. She would bring her children to meet their cousin, Kaisha, and gradually the families began to blend together in ways none of them had expected. The biggest surprise came 6 months later, during Maya's 17th birthday party. David had invited both sets of biological relatives, nervous about how it would go. But as he watched Robert teaching Zara to throw a baseball while Beverly helped Kaisha with her piano technique, and Maria braided Maya's hair the same way David had learned to do years ago, he realized something beautiful was happening, the shocking truth that had threatened to destroy. Their family had actually made it bigger and stronger. "Dad," Maya said to him that evening as they were cleaning up paper plates and birthday decorations, "I need to tell you something." David's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "I love my grandparents, and Kaisha loves her aunt. And we love learning about our birth mothers, but you're still our dad. You're the one who taught us to be strong, who showed us what unconditional love looks like. That doesn't change just because we found out where we came from." Kaisha nodded, coming over to stand next to Maya. "You chose us when no one else would. You kept us together when everyone said it was too hard. That makes you more our father than anyone else could ever be." Zara, now 13 and still the family's source of sunshine, wrapped her arms around David's waist. "Plus, you make the best pancakes. Our birth families are awesome, but they don't know the secret ingredient." David laughed through his tears. "What secret ingredient?" "Love," Zara said simply. "You put love in everything you make for us." A year later, David's photo album had grown much thicker. Pictures of birthday parties with grandparents, Christmas mornings with extended cousins, piano recitals with biological aunts cheering in the audience. Pictures of Maya's high school graduation, where she had 5 sets of parents cheering for her instead of one. The girls had decided to keep the Thompson name, even as they embraced their individual heritage stories. Maya Johnson Thompson, Kaisha Martinez Thompson, Zara Washington Thompson. Names that honored both where they came from and where they had chosen to belong. Sometimes people asked David if he regretted adopting them, now that he knew the truth about how complicated their story really was. The question always made him shake his head. Family isn't about blood, he would tell them. It's about showing up. It's about staying when things get hard. It's about choosing each other every single day. And in the Thompson house, where love was the secret ingredient in everything, that choice had created something more beautiful than any of them could have imagined. A family that proved that sometimes the most shocking truth of all is just how big love can grow when you let it.